A single decision forged in the crucible of prejudice was about to cost an airline millions of dollars and a woman her entire career. At New York's JFK International Airport, inside the gleaming exclusive Apex Lounge elite services manager, Estelle Carlson saw a man she deemed unworthy. Dressed in a simple grey hoodie and jeans, he didn't fit her profile of success. In the next 10 minutes, she would unleash a torrent of condescending remarks and public humiliation. What she didn't know was that the man she was belittling, Dr. Caleb Foster, wasn't just another passenger. And just beyond the lounge's panoramic windows, his 10-passenger $60 million Gulfstream G700 was making its final approach, ready to deliver a lesson in karma that would echo from the runway to the boardroom. The Apex Lounge at Transcontinental Airways Terminal 4 was designed to be an oasis, a hermetically sealed bubble of tranquility amidst the delightful chaos of John F. Kennedy International Airport. Its polished chrome accents, Italian leather armchairs and floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows offered a sense of serene detachment from the thousands of stories unfolding below on the bustling tarmac. For the airline's most valued customers, it was a place to sip complimentary champagne, close multi-million-dollar deals on secure Wi-Fi, and forget they were merely waiting. Presiding over this curated calm was Estelle Carlson. In her crisp navy blue uniform, with its silver wing pin, Estelle was the self-appointed gatekeeper of this sanctuary. Nearing 50 with her blonde hair pulled back into a severe, unyielding bun, and a face that seemed permanently etched with faint disapproval. She didn't just manage the lounge, she ruled it. She had worked for Transcontinental for 22 years, climbing from a check-in agent to this coveted post. In her mind, the Apex Lounge wasn't a service, it was a club, and she was the one who guarded the velvet rope. She moved through the space with an air of practiced authority, her eyes scanning for infractions, a bag left unattended, a passenger speaking too loudly on their phone, a child straying from the designated family corner. Her smile, when she chose to deploy it, was a thin, sharp thing that rarely reached her cold blue eyes. She could spot a real Rolex from a convincing fake at 20 paces and could gauge a person's net worth by the cut of their suit and the brand of their briefcase. These were the skills she valued, the metrics by which she judged who truly belonged. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the lounge was humming with its usual clientele. A hedge fund manager from Greenwich barked orders into his phone. A German diplomat was quietly reading Die Zeit. A young tech founder, barely out of his 20s and dressed in a designer t-shirt that cost more than Estelle's monthly mortgage payment, was typing furiously on a laptop. Estelle had personally greeted each of them, her demeanor shifting subtly based on their perceived status. The diplomat received a respectful nod, the hedge fund manager a deferential, "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Peterson?" And the tech founder a slightly cooler but still welcoming smile. Her assistant, a young man named Kevin, scurried to and fro refilling glasses and clearing plates, always careful to stay out of Estelle's direct line of sight. He knew her moods. He knew that the wrong kind of scuff mark on a passenger's shoe could trigger a 5-minute lecture on brand standards. It was in this carefully controlled environment that Dr. Caleb Foster and his chief of staff, Naomi Preston, arrived. They had just come from a grueling 12-hour session of final negotiations for a merger, and the thought of a quiet hour before their flight was the only thing keeping them going. Caleb Foster was a man whose appearance was a deliberate contradiction to his status. At 42, he possessed a quiet intensity, his thoughtful eyes missing nothing. He was tall and athletic, with a calm, measured presence that drew people in rather than demanded attention. He was the founder and CEO of Aethelred Innovations, a biotechnology firm that was on the verge of releasing a revolutionary gene-editing therapy. His work had been featured in Nature and The Lancet, and his company was valued in the tens of billions. But looking at him, Estelle Carlson would see none of that. She would only see a black man dressed in a soft heather-grey hoodie, dark wash jeans, and a pair of simple, comfortable Allbirds sneakers. There was no flashy watch on his wrist, just a practical fitness tracker. His backpack was a sleek but unbranded Swiss design, chosen for function over fashion. Naomi Preston, walking beside him, was his perfect professional counterpart. Sharp, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit, her gaze was direct and her energy focused. She was the organizer, the protector, the one who handled the details, so Caleb could focus on the science that was changing the world. She held their boarding passes on her phone, the screen glowing with 2 first-class seats to San Francisco. As they approached the reception desk, Estelle's eyes flickered up from her monitor. She took in Naomi first, the suit, the confident stride, the look of a person who belonged. Then her gaze shifted to Caleb, her back straightened, her lips thinned into a familiar line of disapproval. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but Naomi, who was trained to read the faintest signals in a boardroom, felt it like a drop in atmospheric pressure. "Good afternoon," Naomi said, her voice crisp and professional. "We're here for the 4:15 flight to SFO." Estelle's eyes remained fixed on Caleb, raking over his casual attire with an expression that mingled suspicion with disdain. She ignored Naomi completely and spoke directly to him, her tone laced with a saccharine condescension that set Naomi's teeth on edge. "The Apex Lounge is for our first-class and elite status passengers only, sir," she said, her voice just loud enough for the people in the nearby armchairs to overhear. Caleb met her gaze without a flicker of emotion. "We're aware," he said, his voice a calm baritone. "We have first-class tickets." Estelle held out a perfectly manicured hand, not looking at the phone Naomi was holding, but at Caleb, as if he were the one who needed to produce credentials. "Let me see them." Naomi stepped forward, placing her phone on the counter. "The QR codes are right here." Estelle finally deigned to glance at the phone. She scanned the first code, Naomi's, with a perfunctory beep. Then she scanned Caleb's. The machine beeped green. A confirmation flashed on her screen. Foster Caleb. Seat 2A. First class. For a moment, Estelle was silent. The computer had confirmed his right to be there, but her gut, her finely honed instrument of prejudice, told her otherwise. People like that, dressed so carelessly ordinarily didn't belong in her lounge. They were usually flying on discounted tickets or using a one-time pass someone else had given them. They lowered the tone. She looked up from the screen, a new, more insidious strategy forming behind her eyes. The rules were her weapon, and she knew how to wield them. "We have a dress code," she announced, the statement hanging in the air. Naomi's head snapped up. "A dress code. We fly this route monthly. There's no dress code that would preclude a hoodie." Estelle gave Naomi a dismissive glance before turning her full attention back to Caleb. "We expect a certain standard of attire to maintain the lounge's professional and relaxing atmosphere. Athletic wear hoodies? It's generally discouraged," the hedge fund manager, Mr. Saul. Peterson looked up from his phone, a flicker of irritation on his face at the disturbance. The tech founder smirked, clearly enjoying the drama. Caleb remained placid, a rock in the stream of her hostility. "This isn't athletic wear, it's cashmere," he stated simply, not as a boast, but as a point of fact. and we are just looking for a quiet place to work before our flight." Estelle was not to be deterred. She saw his calmness not as a sign of confidence, but as a challenge to her authority. This was her house, her rules. "I'm the manager here," she said, her voice hardening, the false sweetness evaporating. "And I reserve the right to refuse entry to anyone who does not comply with our lounge standards. I'm sure you can find somewhere more suitable for your needs in the main terminal." The words "suitable for your needs" were delivered with a particular emphasis, a clear insinuation that he and his needs were of a lower class. The insult was no longer veiled. It was raw, public, and delivered with the full force of her perceived authority. The quiet hum of the lounge had faded. Several passengers were now openly staring. Naomi's face was a mask of cold fury. She opened her mouth to unleash a torrent of legal and corporate threats, but Caleb put a gentle hand on her arm, a silent command to stand down. He looked directly at Estelle, his calm gaze unblinking. He wasn't angry. He was observant. He was a scientist, and he was watching a predictable reaction unfold based on a flawed hypothesis. "I understand," he said, his voice even. "Thank you for your time." Without another word, he turned and walked away from the desk, Naomi falling into step beside him, her entire body radiating suppressed rage. They didn't head for the exit. Instead, they walked over to the vast panoramic windows, stopping at a spot that gave them a clear, unobstructed view of the runways. Estelle watched them go, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She had done her job. She had protected the sanctity of the Apex Lounge. She had put someone who didn't belong in his place. She turned back to her computer, feeling a surge of satisfaction, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just ignited a fuse on a bomb that would obliterate her entire world. The silence that followed Caleb and Naomi's retreat from the desk was thick and uncomfortable. The other passengers in the Apex Lounge quickly averted their gazes, some with a hint of shame, others with smug amusement. Mr. Peterson, the hedge fund manager, grunted and returned to his phone call while the young tech founder openly typed something on his laptop, probably a snarky post for his social media. The drama was over, it seemed. Estelle Carlson had won. She smoothed down the front of her uniform, feeling vindicated. "Some people just don't understand decorum," she muttered to Kevin, who was pretending to polish an already spotless chrome countertop nearby. Kevin just nodded, keeping his eyes down. He had seen Estelle do this before, though rarely with such overt hostility. He felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. Something about the calm way the man had walked away felt different. It wasn't the defeated slump of someone who'd been rightfully turned away. It was the quiet patience of someone waiting for the next move in a chess game. Meanwhile, over by the window, Naomi was vibrating with fury. "Caleb, this is unacceptable," she hissed, her voice low but intense. "This is blatant discrimination. I have our corporate counsel's number on speed dial. We can have her head on a platter before we even board. We can sue the airline into the ground. Transcontinental handles $15 million of Ethelred's travel and logistics annually. They are going to hear about this." Caleb didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the sky, scanning the flight path. He was still the picture of serenity, a deep, calm ocean beneath Naomi's raging storm. This, she knew, was his way. He never reacted in the heat of the moment. He observed, he analyzed, and then he acted with devastating precision. "Patience, Naomi," he said, finally, his voice still even. "Let the variables play out." Variables, Caleb, that woman just humiliated you based on the color of your skin and the fact you're not wearing a three-piece suit. She insinuated you were trash who didn't belong. There are no variables here, only a clear-cut case of corporate prejudice. The board of directors needs to know that this is the face of the airline they've partnered with. And they will, he assured her. But a lawsuit is messy. A phone call from a lawyer is expected. What's about to happen is a teachable moment, not just for her, but for the entire airline. Naomi frowned, confused. What's about to happen? As if on cue, Caleb pointed towards the sky. There, he said, right on time. Naomi followed his gaze. In the distance, a sleek white aircraft was descending its profile, sharp and distinct against the hazy New York sky. It wasn't a commercial airliner. It was smaller, more agile, with a T-tail and wing-mounted engines that screamed power and performance. As it grew closer, its form became unmistakable. A Gulfstream G700, the pinnacle of private aviation, a flying testament to wealth and influence. The jet executed a flawless landing on runway 31L, its tires kissing the asphalt with a puff of white smoke. It was a beautiful machine, pristine and powerful, looking more like a futuristic spacecraft than a conventional plane. Inside the lounge, a few aviation enthusiasts took notice. "Wow, a G700, one man murmured to his companion. "You don't see many of those. Wonder who's on board." Estelle, from her perch at the reception desk, barely gave it a glance. Private jets were a common sight at JFK landing at the private terminals, far from her commercial domain. It meant nothing to her. But the Gulfstream didn't taxi towards the general aviation hangars. Instead, guided by a lead vehicle, it made a slow, deliberate turn heading directly towards a private high-security gate adjacent to Terminal 4, a gate directly in view of the Apex Lounge. This was unusual. That gate was typically reserved for heads of state or sensitive diplomatic transfers. A murmur went through the lounge. Mr. Peterson lowered his phone. The tech founder stopped typing. All eyes were now on the gleaming white jet as it came to a graceful stop on the tarmac, its powerful Rolls-Royce engines winding down with a deep, satisfying hum. Estelle stood up, a flicker of professional curiosity crossing her features. Who could warrant such a prime parking spot? A politician? A celebrity? Naomi was watching Caleb's face. Not the plane. A slow smile was spreading across her lips as understanding began to dawn. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, you didn't." Caleb gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a twinkle in his eye. "Our flight to San Francisco was always a backup," he explained quietly. "The merger talks finished 6 hours ahead of schedule. I had the G700 rerouted from Teterboro to pick us up here. Seemed more efficient." The full weight of the situation crashed down on Naomi. They weren't flying first class on transcontinental. They were flying on that. Caleb hadn't booked a seat. He owned the plane. He wasn't just a passenger being denied entry to a lounge. He was an aviation client so significant that he could have his private aircraft pick him up at a commercial terminal gate. On the tarmac, the jet's door opened a staircase elegantly unfolding to the ground. A moment later, 2 black Cadillac Escalades with official Port Authority markings sped across the apron, pulling up precisely at the bottom of the stairs. Estelle squinted, her brow furrowed. "What in the world is going on?" she said, to no one in particular. Her question was answered when the main door to the Apex Lounge swished open. 2 people entered, and they were not passengers. One was a man in a dark, sharply tailored suit, his face a grim mask of urgency. The other was Daniel Peterson, not the hedge fund manager, but the director of JFK's Terminal 4 operations, a man Estelle knew well and feared. Director Peterson's face was pale, and he looked like he had just run a marathon. He didn't even glance at the reception desk. His eyes scanned the lounge frantically, finally locking on to the two figures standing by the window. He strode past Estelle as if she were a piece of furniture, his expensive shoes clicking urgently on the polished floor. "Dr. Foster," he called out, his voice a mixture of panic and extreme deference. The use of the title doctor sent a small shock wave through the room. The hedge fund manager sat up straighter. The tech founder's smirk vanished. Estelle's blood ran cold. Foster. The name on the boarding pass she had dismissed. Dr. Foster. She watched frozen as the director of terminal operations came to a stop in front of the man she had just publicly shamed. "Dr. Foster, I am so sorry," Director Peterson said, slightly out of breath. "We got the message from your pilot that you had arrived at the terminal ahead of schedule. We had to hold the departure of transcontinental flight 412 to clear the taxiway for your aircraft. Your transport is here. We can escort you to the gate immediately. Again, my deepest apologies for the delay." Caleb turned his head slowly, his calm gaze shifting from the jet outside to the flustered executive in front of him. "There was no delay on your part, Daniel," he said, his tone polite, but with an underlying edge of steel. "The delay was here, with your partner Airline's hospitality." Director Peterson's eyes widened in horror. He followed Caleb's gaze, which flicked for a brief, damning second towards the reception desk. Peterson's head snapped around his eyes, locking onto Estelle Carlson. In that moment, Estelle felt a sensation like falling from a great height. The polished floor seemed to drop away beneath her feet. The carefully constructed world she ruled, the little kingdom of the Apex Lounge, crumbled into dust around her. The man in the hoodie was not just a first-class passenger. He was not just a doctor. He was someone who could halt a commercial flight path, someone the airport's top director addressed with frantic, bowing respect. He was Dr. Caleb Foster, and she had just told him he wasn't welcome. The air in the Apex Lounge grew heavy, sucked into the vacuum created by Director Peterson's horrified stare. Every eye was now fixed on the drama unfolding, a real-time corporate execution in the making. The whispers had ceased, replaced by a tense, voyeuristic silence. For Estelle Carlson, the world had narrowed to a single point, the accusing eyes of the terminal director and the calm, unreadable face of Dr. Caleb Foster. Director Peterson's face, which was already pale, seemed to drain of all remaining color. He was a man who juggled the logistics of one of the world's busiest airports, dealing with bomb threats, mechanical failures, and diplomatic incidents. But the look on his face now was one of pure, unadulterated terror. He understood with the immediate clarity of a seasoned executive the magnitude of the disaster that had just occurred on his watch in his terminal. He took a half step back from Caleb, as if to physically distance himself from the source of the problem. His voice, when he finally spoke to Estelle, was dangerously low, a coiled serpent of fury. "Miss Carlson," he began, the name pronounced like a verdict. "What has happened here?" Estelle's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her mind was a frantic scramble of excuses and justifications. The dress code, the lounge standards, maintaining decorum. The words that had felt so powerful and righteous just minutes ago now seemed like flimsy, pathetic shields against the incoming cataclysm. Naomi Preston, seeing her opening, stepped forward. Her voice was cold, precise, and utterly damning. She didn't raise it, but every word cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "What happened, Director Peterson?" she said, addressing him but making sure everyone, especially Estelle, heard, "is that your elite services manager for Transcontinental Airways decided that Dr. Foster, the CEO of Ethelred Innovations and one of your airline's largest corporate clients, was not fit to enter this lounge." She let the title and the client status hang in the air for a moment. She publicly questioned his right to be here, despite a valid first-class boarding pass. She then invoked a non-existent and discriminatory dress code to deny him entry, suggesting he find a more suitable location in the main terminal. In short, she humiliated a man this airport just rerouted air traffic for. Director Peterson looked as if he had been physically struck. His gaze swung back to Estelle, no longer just angry, but filled with a kind of bewildered contempt. "Estelle, is this true?" Estelle swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry as desert sand. I was just upholding the standards," she stammered, her voice a weak, reedy thing. "His attire was very casual. I didn't realize who he was." It was the worst possible thing she could have said. It was a confession. It admitted that her standard of service was entirely dependent on her perception of a person's identity. Caleb finally spoke, and his quiet voice commanded the attention of the entire room. He turned to face Estelle directly. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like a professor addressing a student who had fundamentally failed to grasp the most basic concept of the lesson. "So the problem is not what you did, but who you did it to," he said, his voice dissecting her excuse with surgical precision. "The standards you are upholding only apply to people you don't recognize. Does a person's dignity become valid only when you can attach a title or a net worth to their name? Is respect a commodity you dispense based on the brand of their clothing?" He paused, letting his questions settle. "Your job, Ms. Carlson, as I understand it, is to provide service, hospitality. You have failed in that duty. Not just to me, but to the very principles your company claims to represent." He then turned to Director Peterson. "Daniel Ethelred. Innovations spends over $15 million annually with Transcontinental Airways on corporate travel, not including our air freight logistics. We have a corporate-wide policy that stipulates our partners must meet certain standards of professionalism and inclusivity. Today, Transcontinental has demonstrated a catastrophic failure to meet those standards." The figure $15 million sucked the last remaining oxygen from the room. It was a number that transcended a simple customer complaint. It was a number that gets people fired. It was a number that makes stock prices quiver. Estelle's knees felt weak. She gripped the edge of the reception desk to keep herself steady. This wasn't happening. It was a nightmare. The man in the hoodie wasn't just some rich guy. He was a corporate titan, a client whose business was likely a cornerstone of this entire hub's profitability. Director Peterson's professional composure finally snapped. He pulled out his phone and spoke into it with clipped, brutal efficiency. "Get me Robert Walsh, now!" Robert Walsh was Transcontinental's Vice President of North American Operations. He was Estelle's boss's boss's boss. He was, for all intents and purposes, a god within the company hierarchy. While Peterson waited for the call to connect, Caleb turned to Naomi. "Let's go. We'll be late." He gave a final dismissive nod to the stunned onlookers and began walking towards the lounge exit where the director's aide was holding the door. Estelle, in a last desperate act of self-preservation, scurried out from behind the desk. "Dr. Foster, Wait, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Please, I am so sorry. It was a misunderstanding. A terrible mistake. Caleb stopped, but didn't turn around. No, Miss Carlson, he said over his shoulder. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. You made a choice based on a brief look at me, and you stand by that choice. The only mistake, from your perspective, was that I turned out to be someone with the power to hold you accountable. The apology is noted, but it is not accepted. His final words were delivered with a chilling finality. He and Naomi then swept out of the lounge, escorted by the airport officials, leaving a wake of stunned silence. The remaining passengers watched as Dr. Foster was personally escorted across the tarmac and up the stairs to his magnificent jet. The door closed, and within minutes the Gulfstream's engines spooled up. It taxied away with the fluid grace of a predator, powerful and untouchable. Back in the lounge, the spell was broken. Director Peterson's call had connected. "Robert," he barked into the phone, his voice shaking with rage. "I am standing in your Apex lounge at JFK. I have a 5-alarm fire for you. Ethelred Innovations is about to pull their entire corporate account. No, I'm not exaggerating. Your lounge manager just publicly humiliated their CEO, Dr. Caleb Foster. Yes, that Dr. Foster." Estelle stood frozen, listening to the one-sided conversation that was sealing her fate. "I don't care what you're doing," Peterson snarled. "Get a senior VP down here immediately. And as for the manager, remove her. I want her out of my terminal. Her access is revoked as of this second. I'm not having her incompetence jeopardize my airport's relationship with a client of this magnitude. Handle it. Now." He hung up. He didn't even look at Estelle again. To him, she no longer existed. She was just a problem that was being solved. He turned and strode out of the lounge, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her career. Kevin, the young assistant, was staring at her, his face a mixture of pity and fear. The hedge fund manager was already on his own phone, likely shorting transcontinental stock. The tech founder was furiously typing, a gleam in his eye. He knew a viral story when he saw one. The phone at the reception desk rang. Estelle stared at it, her hand trembling. She knew who it was. It was the call. After 22 years of service, of building her little fiefdom, of judging others from her throne of corporate authority, it was all over. Her quiet execution was complete. All that was left was the fallout. The 10 minutes following Dr. Foster's departure were the longest of Estelle Carlson's life. The ringing of the reception desk phone was a shrill, insistent siren signaling the end. With a trembling hand, she answered it. The voice on the other end was that of her direct supervisor, a regional manager named Paul. His tone was not angry. It was funereal. "Estelle," he said, the lack of any preamble a terrible sign. "I've just been on a conference call with Robert Walsh and the legal team. I need you to pack your personal belongings from your locker. Your building access has been revoked. A security escort will meet you at the lounge entrance in 5 minutes to walk you out of the terminal. Your employment with Transcontinental Airways is suspended pending a formal investigation." "Suspended?" Estelle choked out the word, a desperate, pathetic sliver of hope. Paul's sigh was heavy with resignation. "Estelle, this is a formality. The instruction from Walsh was terminate with extreme prejudice. The legal team is just making sure all the I's are dotted. Don't go home. Go straight to the corporate office in Queens. HR needs to conduct your exit interview today. It's over." The line went dead. Estelle placed the receiver back in its cradle with a clatter. Over. A single word that encompassed 22 years of her life. Her identity, her pride, gone. She moved like a zombie, her limbs heavy and uncooperative. She walked to the small staff room behind the reception area, the eyes of every passenger following her. There was no sympathy in their gazes, only the cold curiosity of strangers witnessing a public downfall. Her locker contained little a spare pair of shoes, a bottle of aspirin, a framed photo of her late mother. As she placed these meager possessions into a plastic grocery bag, the two security guards arrived. They were large, impassive men who stood at the lounge entrance, their presence a public declaration of her disgrace. As she was escorted out, walking past the passengers, she had so meticulously judged, she felt 1,000 times more scrutinized than she had ever made anyone feel. Her own rules of appearance and status were now being used against her. She was no longer Estelle Carlson, the elite manager. She was a terminated employee, being frog-marched out of her own kingdom under a cloud of shame. The walk through the bustling terminal, the place she had commanded for years, was a blur of averted faces and echoing announcements. It was a walk of shame she would never forget. But her firing was only the first stone in an avalanche of consequences that was just beginning to gather momentum. Up in the stratosphere aboard the serene quiet of the Ethelred G700, Caleb Foster was not celebrating. He sat in a plush leather seat, sipping a glass of water while Naomi furiously typed out a formal summary of the incident. "The board is going to want to sever the contract immediately," Naomi said, not looking up from her laptop. "This is a clear breach of the ethics clause in our partnership agreement." "I agree," Caleb said quietly. "But this can't just be punitive. It has to be constructive. We're pulling a $15 million contract. That's a loud voice. We need to use it to say something meaningful." He continued, "Draft 2 documents, Naomi. The first is a formal immediate termination of our contract with Transcontinental Airways, citing a demonstrated failure to uphold standards of professional decorum and an environment of discriminatory practice. The second is a public statement. I want it to be clear that this isn't about one employee. It's about a corporate culture that allows such behavior to fester. We will be redirecting our business to an airline that has a publicly audited and proven commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. By the time the Gulfstream touched down in San Francisco, the first document was already in the inbox of Transcontinental's CEO, Gregory Finch. The effect was instantaneous and brutal. An emergency board meeting was convened via video conference within the hour. The news was catastrophic. The loss of the Ethelred account was not just a financial blow. It was a devastating blow to their reputation. Ethelred Innovations was one of the most respected and forward-thinking companies in the world. Being publicly fired by them was a corporate black eye of the highest order. The second document, the public statement, was released to the press 2 hours later. It was picked up by the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Reuters within minutes. The story was framed perfectly. Biotech giant Ethelred Innovations dumps Transcontinental Airways over discrimination incident. Simultaneously, another bomb went off. The tech founder from the lounge, a man named Leo Kwan, had written a detailed minute-by-minute blog post about what he had witnessed. He had even discreetly filmed the moment Director Peterson confronted Estelle. The 45-second clip showing the airport director's panic and Estelle's crumbling facade went viral. By midnight, that airport Estelle was trending on Twitter. Estelle Carlson, who had arrived home to her small apartment in a state of shock, was oblivious to her newfound internet infamy until her phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications. Friends, former colleagues, even distant relatives were sending her links to the articles and the video. She watched the clip, her face a ghostly white in the glow of her phone screen. She saw herself not as the authoritative manager she imagined, but as a petty, cruel woman being dressed down. The comments were a torrent of digital vitriol. She was a Karen on steroids, a racist relic. Her face was now the international symbol of corporate prejudice. The next morning, Transcontinental's stock opened down 3%. While not a crash, it represented a paper loss of nearly $400 million in market capitalization, all stemming from a single ugly interaction in an airport lounge. CEO Gregory Finch was in full damage control mode. He issued a groveling public apology, promising a top-to-bottom review of our customer service protocols and sensitivity training. He announced the immediate implementation of a new company-wide initiative, ironically and without their permission, called the Foster Mandate, aimed at ensuring respectful and unbiased service. But the damage was done. The story was out. The cascade was in full motion. For Estelle, the consequences were just beginning. She was for all intents and purposes unemployable in the airline or hospitality industry. Her name and face were now toxic. No reputable company would touch her. Her resume, once a source of pride, was now a chronicle of a career that ended in viral infamy. Weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Transcontinental's legal department. The internal investigation had concluded she was solely responsible for the incident, citing gross misconduct and willful violation of corporate policy, which gave them grounds to deny her severance package. After 22 years of service, she was left with nothing. The financial pressure mounted quickly. Without a job, and with her reputation in tatters, she couldn't afford the rent on her apartment. She was forced to sell her car and move into a cramped, depressing room in her sister's house, in a different state, a place where she hoped no one would recognize her. One evening, while listlessly watching the news, a segment came on about Ethelred Innovations. They were announcing the successful completion of Phase 3 trials for their new therapy, a treatment that effectively cured a rare and aggressive form of childhood leukemia. The screen showed an interview with Dr. Caleb Foster. He was articulate, compassionate, and brilliant, speaking about his hope for a future where disease could be managed at the genetic level. He was a man literally saving children's lives. Estelle stared at the screen, the full crushing weight of her misjudgment finally hitting her. She hadn't just insulted a wealthy man in a hoodie. She had shown contempt for a person of profound substance and importance, a man whose contributions to humanity would be remembered long after her name was a forgotten hashtag. Her world had been small, petty, and built on judging the surface of things. His was vast, impactful, and focused on the very code of life itself. The contrast was a final, brutal karma, a quiet truth that would haunt her for the rest of her days. The story of Estelle Carlson and Dr. Caleb Foster did not end with a firing and a viral video. What happened in the Apex Lounge became a catalyst, a point of ignition for a much larger and more significant chain of events. Caleb's quiet, principled stand rippled outward, transforming from a personal insult into a corporate and cultural reckoning. Ethelred Innovations made good on its promise. A week after terminating their contract with Transcontinental, Naomi Preston, under Caleb's direction, concluded a thorough review of other major airlines. They didn't just look at flight routes and pricing. They analyzed corporate diversity reports, examined the makeup of their executive boards, and conducted confidential interviews with employees at various levels to gauge the true inclusivity of the company culture. They ultimately chose to sign a new, even larger $20 million annual contract with Delta Airlines. But they didn't do it quietly. Caleb Foster and Delta's CEO, Ed Bastian, held a joint press conference to announce the partnership. In front of a bank of cameras, Caleb was asked about the Transcontinental incident. He responded not with anger, but with the thoughtful precision of a scientist. What occurred at JFK was not the fault of a single employee. He stated his voice calm and steady. A single employee is a symptom. The disease is a corporate culture that either actively encourages or passively tolerates prejudice. A culture where employees feel empowered to make judgments based on appearance is a broken one. We are not just moving our business. We are investing in a partner that has demonstrated a proactive and measurable commitment to ensuring that every single passenger is treated with dignity. This isn't just about good ethics. It's about good business. The message was clear and powerful. Corporate spending was now being explicitly tied to social responsibility. Other companies took notice. Within the next 6 months, 3 other Fortune 500 companies, citing Aethelred's lead, announced they were adding inclusivity and equity audits as a standard part of their vendor selection process. A small but significant movement had begun. The Foster Mandate, the term Transcontinental's CEO had coined in panic, was now being unironically used in business schools to describe this new form of socially conscious corporate procurement. For Transcontinental Airways, the nightmare continued. The initial stock dip was just the beginning. The public branding of being fired by a company like Aethelred stuck to them like tar. Their quarterly earnings report, released 2 months after the incident, was dismal. It wasn't just the direct loss of the $15 million contract. It was the brand contagion. Business travelers, especially those from the tech and biotech sectors, began choosing other carriers. The Apex Lounge, once a symbol of prestige, became the subject of jokes. Competing airlines' sales teams used the incident as a potent weapon, asking potential corporate clients, "Do you want to partner with an airline that values all your employees?" CEO Gregory Finch was forced to take drastic action. Robert Walsh, the VP of North American Operations, was offered an early retirement. A new executive position was created, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, reporting directly to the CEO. The company poured millions into a massive retraining program designed by a top consulting firm. It was a costly, painful, and public penance. The internal culture at Transcontinental was thrown into turmoil. Employees were on edge. Managers who had operated like Estelle, ruling their small domains with an iron fist, were suddenly under intense scrutiny. Anonymous reporting hotlines were established, and a flood of complaints about other Estelles in the system came pouring in. The incident had emboldened employees who had previously been too afraid to speak up. A quiet purge began, as dozens of managers and long-time employees with histories of complaints were quietly let go. The company was being forced to cleanse itself from the inside out. The ripple effect even reached the man who had witnessed it all firsthand. Leo Kwan, the tech founder who posted the video, saw his blog's traffic explode. His post was hailed as a prime example of citizen journalism holding corporate power to account. He was invited on news shows and podcasts to talk about what he saw. The sudden publicity gave his own startup a massive unexpected boost, and a few months later, he closed a round of funding that he directly attributed to the visibility he gained from the incident. He sent a bottle of expensive whiskey to Caleb's office with a simple note: "Thanks for the lesson in karma. The world needs more of it." Even director Daniel Peterson at JFK saw his world change. The Port Authority, while pleased, he had acted swiftly to appease Dr. Foster was furious that the incident had happened under his command. He was subjected to a grueling internal review. While he kept his job, he was tasked with spearheading a new terminal-wide passenger dignity initiative. His career was now inextricably linked to fixing the problem that had exploded in his terminal. All of these massive, complex outcomes, all of these careers, altered contracts, signed and policies rewritten, all stemmed from one woman's decision to trust her prejudice over the evidence of a boarding pass. Estelle Carlson, now living in her sister's spare bedroom in Ohio, and working a part-time job stocking shelves at a grocery store, was completely unaware of the corporate revolution she had inadvertently sparked. Her world had shrunk to the price of milk and the ache in her feet after a long shift. She was a ghost of her former self, haunted by a single catastrophic failure of judgment, while the world she had been ejected from was being reshaped in its wake. A year passed. The world moved on as it always does. The hashtag #AirportEstelle faded into the vast graveyard of internet memes. Transcontinental Airways began a slow, arduous journey of rebuilding its reputation, their new chief diversity officer becoming a regular face at industry conferences. Delta and Ethelred Innovations celebrated their successful and highly publicized partnership. Life continued. For Caleb Foster, the year had been one of monumental achievement. Ethelred's leukemia therapy received full FDA approval and was being hailed as one of the most significant medical breakthroughs of the decade. He had become a more public figure, not by choice but by necessity. He used his platform not only to discuss science, but also to advocate for ethics in business and technology. He never spoke of the JFK incident again in public, but its lesson was woven into the fabric of his leadership. One crisp autumn afternoon, Caleb was flying back from a medical conference in Chicago. He was not on his G700 this time. Ethelred was in the middle of a massive philanthropic push, and he had loaned the jet to a non-profit that transported critically ill children to specialized hospitals. It was a gesture typical of the man he was. Instead, he was flying commercial booked in first class on a Delta flight. As he settled into his seat, a flight attendant approached him. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a warm, genuine smile. "Dr. Foster," she asked. "It's an honor to have you on board. My name is Susan, and I'll be your lead flight attendant today. Can I get you something to drink before we take off?" "Just some water would be great, Susan." "Thank you," he replied with a smile. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Doctor, I hope you don't mind me saying, but many of us at Delta followed what happened last year. What you did, the stand you took, it meant a lot, not just to us, but to a lot of people in this industry. It made a difference." Caleb was taken aback. "I just did what I thought was right." "That's why it made a difference," she said softly, before heading to the galley. The flight was smooth and uneventful. As they began their descent into New York, Caleb looked out the window at the familiar landscape. He felt a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with positive change. Meanwhile, in a different part of the country, another landing was taking place. Estelle Carlson stepped off a city bus in a dreary, rain-slicked suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Her uniform was no longer a crisp navy blue, but a drab, ill-fitting red polo shirt bearing the logo of Save a Lot, a discount grocery chain. Her hair was no longer in a severe, authoritative bun, but hung limply around her tired face. Her shift had been grueling. 8 hours of stocking heavy cans, dealing with rude customers, and being ordered around by a manager half her age. The physical exhaustion was immense, but it was nothing compared to the soul-crushing weight of her new reality. She was anonymous, invisible, a person of no consequence. All the status and authority she had cherished were gone, replaced by the simple, brutal need to earn enough to pay her sister for rent and utilities. She walked the few blocks to her sister's small house, her head down against the rain. She had tried applying for other jobs, office administrator, receptionist, anything that would let her sit down. But her name was a liability. A simple Google search was all it took for a potential employer to see the news articles and the viral video. The name Estelle Carlson was now synonymous with problem. As she entered the house, her sister, a weary but kind woman named Carol, was watching the local news. "Rough day?" Carol asked, her eyes full of a pity that Estelle found almost unbearable. "The usual," Estelle mumbled, dropping her worn-out bag by the door. On the television, the local news anchor was covering a story about a philanthropic grant. Local Columbus Children's Hospital today received a $5 million grant from the Ethelred Innovations Foundation, the anchor announced cheerfully. The grant will fully fund a new pediatric oncology wing. We spoke earlier with Ethelred's CEO, Dr. Caleb Foster, via satellite. Estelle froze. His face filled the screen. He looked exactly the same, calm, confident, dignified. He spoke about the importance of giving every child a fighting chance, about the responsibility of successful companies to invest back into the communities they serve. Carol, oblivious to the name's significance for Estelle, said, "Wow, what a wonderful man. Imagine having that much money and using it to save kids." Estelle couldn't speak. She stared at the screen at the face of the man she had scorned. He was here in her new city, his influence reaching down from the heavens of philanthropy to the very hospital where her own nephew had been treated for asthma last year. He was a force for good, a creator, a healer. And she had been a gatekeeper, a petty tyrant of a tiny, insignificant kingdom. She had built her world on the flimsy foundation of judging others, and in one afternoon, that world had been washed away, leaving her stranded in this bleak reality. The news segment ended. The weather report came on. But Estelle was still seeing his face. The karma that had hit her wasn't just about losing her job or her reputation. It wasn't about the viral video or the financial hardship. The true crushing weight of her karma was the daily inescapable knowledge of her own smallness in the face of his greatness. He had moved on and was changing the world for the better. She was trapped in the prison of her past, stocking cans of soup and thinking of what might have been if she had just chosen a single moment of simple human decency. It was a life sentence served not in a jail, but in the quiet, desperate regret of her own heart. Several years later, the name Estelle Carlson had been all but forgotten by the world. The Internet's memory is long, but its attention span is short. Transcontinental Airways, under new leadership, had successfully rebranded itself as a more inclusive and passenger-focused airline. The Foster mandate was now a widely accepted business school case study on corporate social responsibility. Dr. Caleb Foster had receded from the public eye, preferring to focus on his research. Ethelred Innovations had grown into a global pharmaceutical powerhouse, its work saving countless lives. Caleb remained its guiding force, a quiet, brilliant man who never forgot the lesson he both taught and learned that day at JFK, that a person's true worth is measured not by their visibility, but by their impact. One day an email landed in the general inquiry inbox of the Ethelred Innovations Foundation. It was a short, simply worded message from a generic email address. To the Ethelred Foundation, I am writing to you today, not to ask for anything, but to say thank you. A few years ago, my grandson was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He was given a poor prognosis by his local doctors, but he was accepted into a clinical trial for a new gene therapy at the Columbus Children's Hospital in the wing that your foundation funded. After 6 months of treatment, his cancer is in complete remission. He is healthy. He is going to live a full life. You gave my family a miracle. Your founder, Dr. Foster, is a great man. What he has built has a power for good that is almost impossible to comprehend. I know this because I once made a terrible mistake in judging him. That mistake cost me everything I thought was important, but it also forced me to see the world and myself in a new light. It taught me in the hardest way possible what truly matters. Thank you for saving my grandson, and thank you for the lesson. Sincerely, a former airline employee. The email was flagged by a junior assistant and forwarded up the chain, eventually landing in the inbox of Naomi Preston, who was now the COO of Ethelred. She read it once, then twice. She knew with absolute certainty who it was from. The reference to a terrible mistake in judging him was unmistakable. She forwarded the email to Caleb without comment. He was in his lab analyzing cellular protein arrays. He read the message on his tablet, his expression unreadable behind his safety glasses. He stood in silence for a long moment, the hum of the laboratory equipment filling the space. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel triumph. He felt a quiet, profound sense of closure. The ledger was balanced. His actions had led to corporate reform and positive change. Her actions had led to her downfall, but through that downfall it seemed she had found a sliver of humility, of perspective. The final karma wasn't her punishment. It was her understanding. He typed a brief reply to Naomi. No action needed. Just file it. He then put down the tablet and returned to his microscope, focusing on the intricate, beautiful patterns of the cells before him. He was a man who dealt in the fundamental building blocks of life, and he knew that life, like science, was a complex system of actions and reactions. Some were loud and explosive, like a jet engine roaring to life. Others were as quiet and transformative as a single cell being healed. Both could change the world. He had seen it happen. And now he had work to do. The past was settled. The future was waiting to be written. This story serves as a powerful reminder that our actions, especially those born from prejudice, have consequences that can ripple out in ways we can never predict. Estelle Carlson's fall wasn't just about losing a job. It was the complete dismantling of a worldview built on shallow judgment. In contrast, Dr. Caleb Foster's victory wasn't in revenge, but in using a moment of disrespect to catalyze meaningful industry-wide change. It's a testament to the idea that true power lies not in authority and gatekeeping, but in quiet dignity, profound impact, and the unwavering belief that respect is non-negotiable. Karma, in the end, isn't always a lightning bolt of retribution. Sometimes it's the slow, dawning realization of what is truly important. If this story of justice resonated with you, and if you believe that character is more important than status, show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more tales of karma and consequence. What part of Estelle's downfall did you find the most satisfying? Let us know in the comments below.